Okay, so welcome everyone, and we've been telling you that we were going to be having a series of special programs as it relates to the Citizen by Investment program. Of course, that program comes by demand. Of course, we have had a lot of our viewers asking if we can have a program where we can speak to one of the officials who can kind of like guide us through what the CBI, the Citizen by Investment program, is all about. And today we are joined by the man himself, I think the most perfect person to speak with in regards to the CBI, Mr. and Senator Christopher Allie, and he is the chairperson of the CBI board. Let's say hello and welcome to him. Good day to you, sir.
Good afternoon to you, Mickey, and happy to be here.
And
Good afternoon.
okay, so it's good to have you with us today. And you know what? A lot of people, they ask the questions about what is the CBI program intended to do? How safe it is. We hear that some countries have CBI programs while others don't. I don't even needless to call these countries names. Of course, some of the leaders have spoken about that. But Grenada has decided to have a citizen by investment program. I'll first ask you, why is it important for this country to have a CBI program?
Right, and let me start by saying traditionally, countries like ours in the Caribbean and the OECS in particular have limited income streams. Income streams come from tax revenues that we get either from transactions like VAT, corporation tax. Our sectors are limited. You have tourism sectors, you have the education services sector that generate GDP for the country. CBI is proving to be now one of the other income streams that governments can rely on in terms of how the programs are fashioned and what kind of incomes come to the country. So it provides for us to start off an alternative. And a very good example of this was during the pandemic. When we had the pandemic, as we all know what has happened to services and education services and the tourism sector, two leading sectors of our GDP in terms of generating wealth and income in terms of cross-border taxes and so on for government, we seen that the CBI program was very buoyant in the pandemic from March last year to now. As a matter of fact, the unit that administers the applications and deal with applications of prospective applicants functioned right through the pandemic, being deployed home with laptops and so on, so that they could have answered queries and processed files still. So it was one of those sectors that we have that was resistant to the pandemic to some degree. So it has proven itself that it is one of the other revenue streams that a country could look at in order to help it in times of need, as the case be. But the other aspect of CBI, of course, is what it does for the country. And that is the question that most people probably would have in mind. Traditionally, we have always thought that CBI is just a passport selling program. It is far more than that. We have two sections in CBI called Section 10 and Section 11, and Section 11A3 actually, that applicants could apply for citizenship under. Section 10, which deals with monies coming to the country through the National Transformation Fund. So you apply during Section 10, and you will the monies that you apply for through Section 10 will go to the NTF. The NTF is structured in such a way that the government can use monies from it for social development, community centers, bridges, roads, but most importantly, a section of the funds in the NTF goes to what we call a contingency fund. And that contingency fund is set up there to assist the country in times of dire need. So, for example, if we were to have a disaster resulting from a natural phenomenon like a hurricane, or as we have seen, this pandemic, the government can access monies in this contingency fund to help meet its bills as we deal with the disaster that would have happened. So that has proven to be very useful for us. And of course, the second aspect of the CBI is Section 11, which is investment in projects like the tourism sector, ICT, and so on, where companies and individuals will come up with a project. The project will be approved by the CBI, and they could get monies to finance their project and build it out. as we've seen with projects such as Kiwana Bay and Six Senses and others that are being dealt that way. That provides employment to the country, it brings in revenue in terms of construction, jobs and materials, and so on and so forth. So it assists significantly in those areas and to keep those areas and sectors of the country buoyant.
And you have mentioned so many benefits that these programs can bring. But then why are people and governments still skeptical about these programs?
Well, I believe part of the risk that any CBI program offers is the risk of attracting some less than honorable individual to become a citizen of your country. And in Grenada, we have been rated as a gold standard program because we have a quadruple layer of security checks. And quite frankly, we sometimes um, are accused of being a little bit slow because we do a lot of security checks to ensure that the applicants that come to us certainly meet the standard that we set. And we try to protect the reputation of the country and, of course, the program so that we don't get any sort of criminal or people with criminal intent and backgrounds. But as in everything else, it cannot be a perfect system. We will try and put as much safeguards in there as possible. I always cite the example that I may be an honorable individual today. You meet all the criteria to get citizenship, and then a year from now or whenever from now, you engage in criminal activity that we can't see and foresee. And as such, the government has the ability and the authority to withdraw that, depending on what it is and the security implications as we see.
And as you're speaking of criteria, can you just mention some of the criteria that is required for persons to become a citizen of Grenada through the CBI program?
Yeah, one of the things is most of it attract high net worth people as people of a certain income bracket. You have to have good character. You have to make sure your police record and so on is in place. We verify things as your passport, your birth certificate, and all those important documents. If you're married, marriage certificate, and so on. So a number of these checks are done, and on top of that, you of course have to meet what we call a due diligence check, where we would send your details to a due diligence provider who will go through and do all the background checks on your character, what businesses you're associated with, whether these businesses have criminal backgrounds, you have a criminal background. So we do an extensive check through all the international police agencies, whether it be FBI, Interpol, whatever the case may be, and our FIU assists significantly in that area. So we do an extensive checking, and the criteria really is that you have to have the necessary financial net worth to apply to our program, whether it is through a project that is being done, as I said, like the Kiwana Bays, or whether you want to do it through NTF.
That sounds interesting. And you've mentioned the NTF quite a number of times during this interview, and I would also like to have a better understanding of the NTF as well. So the NTF falls under the CBI program, and monies are diverted from the CBI program into the NTF. But what percentage of that money goes there?
Right, so it's not monies diverted. What it is, in the Act of CBI, which is called Section 10, which deals with monies for NTF. If you are an applicant and the investment in NTF, I believe, subject to correction, I think is 220,000 US. And if you are applying to for citizenship through NTF under Section 10, you make the application, you meet all the criteria in terms of your documents, all the security checks are done. If that is approved, then the monies that you have is requested becomes deposited into the coffers of the government. And they are the structure of CBI. There are local agents' fees and marketing agent fees that have to be deducted from that amount of money, and the difference goes to government. So it's monies that through an application process, let's say it's 220, a certain percentage goes to the fees for the local agent and the marketing agent. The difference comes to the government, goes into this fund that we call the National Transformation Fund. And under law, the National Transformation Fund has aspects of it. For example, the contingency fund, where a certain percentage, I believe is 10%, is set aside of the fund for contingency issues, and the rest, the government will then decide what kind of social and community projects, whether it's bridges, roads, or whatever they want to use that fund for. And as you know, all aspects of the use of these funds are supposed to be presented to Cabinet every 6 months as to the use. Government has to report to Cabinet on how these monies are used and accounted for.
Okay. Now, with the NTF, with National Transformation Fund and their project, you mentioned that there are Kawana Bay projects and so on. These projects, are they required to have locals as part of it, or the persons who are investing will determine who and when and everything else that happens with regards to their projects under these programs?
Yes. So let's be clear, Section 10 is for NTF, Section 11, which is a separate section, is for projects under that section, and as I said, the tourism sector is one. So if you were to take, say, one of the projects like Six Senses that's being done in St. David's now, up the owner of the project, the project developer in Six Senses, will put out his project there. He would have come to CBI, he would have presented his project, he would have met the criteria in terms of environmental investment assessments, he would put a project plan, he would have PPP approval, all of the necessary things would have been done, and then once a project meets the criteria that we want, then we approve it through Cabinet. The CBI unit will write it up, send it to Cabinet, Cabinet will approve it, and it becomes a CBI approved project. What that does, Mikey, for the developer, traditionally, a developer, in order to finance the construction of his project, will normally go to a bank, say, and raise X amount of $1 million to finance and construct the project. In CBI, the same X amount of $1 million can be gotten through CBI applications. So if a project for 100 million is available to be developed, that would require a certain number of files at a particular price point. That $100 million less, because what we require from developers is that they put in 20% equity. So in other words, you have to have skin in the game, and 20% of your 100 million you have to come up with on your own. So 20 million to start the construction, and the next 80 million you can get through applications through CBI for your project. The agreement between the developer and the potential investor in that particular project is an agreement between them, and they will structure that in such a way that you may either get shares in the project, you may either buy time in the project, whatever the arrangement is. And then the investor believes that he could move his money into that project and get a return subsequently to investing in that project. So during the time that the project is on the ground and being constructed, CBI monitors, controls to make sure that all the monies that come in for these projects go towards construction and whatever other cost there is, to ensure that this becomes a reality on the ground. And during that process, of course, we provide employment for construction workers. As I said, when the project is completed, there'll be permanent employment, of course, for the staff that becomes part of their business entity. So there is gains in those areas. And of course, depending on the project, there'll be transfer of knowledge in terms of construction and what we do as additional gains. And of course, the economic activity created by the project itself will put money in government coffers down the road.
Interesting. And I noticed that you quickly mentioned in your explanation in terms of care and stuff with the environment. I wanted to talk about that a bit, because what we find happening is that a lot of these projects that come on stream by persons who probably is new to Grenada may not respect, for want of a better word, some of the environmental things that and I don't want to get too specific, things that Grenadians are used to, accustomed to, or things that are just there in the places in its natural habitat. We appreciate those things. However, investors would come and they have a plan for that particular area, and are they just allowed to go ahead and implement their projects or to build their projects wherever they feel like, or are you instrumental in ensuring that when these investors come to Grenada to develop, that they are doing so with minimal impact to the environment and the culture and the way of life of Grenadians?
Right. We demand, as part of the approval process for the project, that an EIA assessment be done for the project, which means that the project developers, wherever they choose to construct or do their project, has to do an environmental impact assessment to understand what the impact of the assessment will be, whether it is spatial, whether it is land impact, sea impact, water, whatever the impact assessment is going to be done, a comprehensive assessment has to be done and presented to us. The CBI does not have the legal teeth in terms of assessing the impact and understanding that the impact meets the standard. That is part of the PPU, Physical Planning Development Unit's responsibility under the law, that when these projects come, a commercial project of that nature, the EIA is submitted to them. They will do the evaluations and they would say to us in approving the plans of the project that this project have met all the criteria and standards as listed in the law. That comes to us, we review that and we say, okay, this project is now ready to proceed, meeting the other criteria that they need to meet. So part of our process is that it has to be done, but the validation of what is done under the law based on what is presented under the physical planning unit section.
All right, thanks for that explanation. Now, in terms of locals, can a local resident, a Grenadian, invest in projects or land under the CBI program?
Of course, we have two Grenadians that have projects under CBI. One of them, and both of them have been built out, and both of them have been successful.
Okay, okay. And in terms of applications and so on, where can people go to apply?
Well, it is done through a process. We have what we call local agents and we have marketing agents. So what we do, Mickey, is that marketing agents will market our program internationally. So our program will be marketed to China, the Asian bloc, the African bloc, and all of these areas. And these are done through international marketing agents, which of course have to register with us at CBI, have to meet standards, of course, as well, in terms of what they market and what they say about our country. Because this is not only about a project, it's also about selling our country and what we offer as a Grenadian country, the warmth of our people, the stability of our economy, and now, our COVID gains, which is attracting a lot of attention. So we market the country significantly in these international marketing agents. These international marketing agents will say, get an applicant from China. That Chinese applicant will now have to meet all the criteria in terms of security and providing all the necessary documents to apply for citizenship. This is done through the local agent. The local agent will now advise the marketing agent of the criteria that have to be met. When the file is completed in terms of all the documentation, the local agent then submits that to the CBI unit for review. And then the CBI unit will take it through its process, its validation process, its security checks. Once that is completed and comes back affirmative in the positive, it comes to the board of the unit for approval, for review and approval. And then once that is completed, we forward it to Prime Minister's office for cabinet to go through, and we recommend, if we recommend approval, and then a certificate is issued for the citizenship. So that is the kind of process that we put the applicants through. The expectation is that could happen in 60 days. At times it doesn't, it goes over the 60 days, but we strive to get it within 60 to 90 days.
And what about the family members of applicants? Once they qualify, once the applicant himself qualified or herself, the family members, the immediate family, also are covered under that qualification?
Well, you have to apply. So even though you are qualified, so if I'm a husband and I am the main applicant applying for citizenship, I can apply for my wife, and if I have a son and a daughter, I can apply for them as well. So when the citizenship is issued, it's issued for everybody, and the security checks is done for everybody as well. Your wife and your children as well is subjected to that. And once they meet the barrier and the standard, then we issue it for the entire family.
Okay, what happens? There are some big name families in City Alley, some big name families. So, daddy is a big boy, and his son, let's take, for example, the former president of the United States, Donald Trump, and he's got his children who are also big names. Is he qualified to, or does the children, can he then apply for his big name children, or they would need to do that separately?
Well, there's a thing in the law that speaks to dependents and dependent children. If you're over a certain age, you then no longer seen as dependent, and you have to apply as as an adult in your own right. So, as to cite your example, the ex-president of the United States in his 70s, his children are big people in their 30s and their 40s. So they can't come in as children. They have to come in as adults in their own right and apply on their own volition to get a citizenship review for our program.
Now, Senator, we have heard it and seen it all. The criticisms, they come from near and from far, and in large numbers. How has that affected the program itself?
It has, in the sense that, education is power. And this is why we're doing this afternoon, Mickey, is that we need to educate our people and to get them to understand that CBI is not just about selling a passport and giving up some sovereignty or some rights and so on that we have and we treasure as Grenadians. But it is about showing to the general public that CBI is a lot more than just selling a passport. It's about developmental aspects of your country, giving the government the flexibility to invest monies in areas that could help our people in difficult circumstances, involving projects, for example. Let me give you an example of a project, for example, I think that could be done on a CBI, Mickey. Let us take, for example, Victoria. Victoria is a fishing village. Victoria has in the past been highlighted as one of the areas that have issues with poverty. Could you imagine if you were to do a fish processing plant in Victoria to maximize the use of fish and fishermen in Goa, fishermen in Victoria, and fishermen in surrounding areas, supply this plant, and this plant is able to provide sustained employment and foreign exchange for the country. Now, a project like that can be done through CBI, and this is one of the flexibilities and increased expanded avenues that CBI offers. You could have projects in your country listed, medical projects, health and wellness, heart recovery. You come and do a heart surgery here and you recover in Grenada on a health and wellness, and you come to us through JIDC with a project for 10, 20 million US, and you could get that financed through CBI. So we are now seeing that the CBI program could attract investors in a different way. And that is what we're looking to see, how we can maximize on things like that. So I say that to say, with all the criticisms that come with CBI, a lot of them center around the issue of security and lapses in security and interference in probably short-circuiting the law. The good thing about our country and our Prime Minister and the government, they have never interfered in the program in any way since I'm sitting there, at least to deal with saying to us, well, this is a friend, this is an application I want you to consider and circumvent the law. So we have not had that, and I believe our Prime Minister is very clear and very certain that the security of the program has to be maintained at sometimes all costs, because one bad applicant could shoot your reputation right down to the gutter, and then you're in trouble.
All right. Thanks for that explanation. And you mentioned the application process, but in terms of the people who are making decisions on the head yourself, can you give us an idea as to who the board members are on the CBI program?
Well, I sit as chairman. Mr. Ronald Theodore is my deputy. He is the head of the GIDC unit. Also sitting there is PS Salian Bagwandowi. I think she's retired now. You have Mr. Alistair Bain, you have Dr. Wayne Sandiford, and our Deputy CEO, CEO also sits on the board, and we also have Ms. Ophelia Wells as a board member as well.
All right, thanks for that. And before we wrap up, I see that we're running out of time. You mentioned something that I just wanted to elaborating on. Can or does the CBI program have a list? I know that you mentioned that people can come in with their projects and so on, but do you have a list of projects that you present to applicants so that they at least can decide whether or not they want to go that route, or they have their own projects that they want to do?
Not yet, Mickey. That is something that is a work in progress as we look to expand the various avenues of our sector where the government believes that priority needs to be focused. We are going to work with them in conjunction with GIDC and the GTA to develop a list so that when we go to the international market to present to Grenadians in the diaspora or anybody else internationally, we can say to you that we want to do for example, a medical facility dealing with heart surgeries, and you can recover in a lovely place like Grenada with sunshine and excellent breathing air, and clean air, and the warmth of our people, and the food, organic food, and from garden to table, all of these things, the positive things that would assist and develop it along those lines. So yes, it is a matter under consideration now, and as we expand and look to diversify CBI and its income streams, that is something that we having discussions with the authorities on.
All right, sound good. Do you find a lot of people are desirous of becoming Grenadian citizens, Mr. Allie?
I give you one example. Before COVID, the American passport was thought to be the greatest passport in the world. Since COVID, our interest in our passport, and I suspect it has a lot to do with the management of the crisis in Grenada, has shot up 150%.
Whoa, 150%. Wow, that's a lot. That's a lot. So hopefully that will translate into successful applicants.
Hopefully.
All right. Is there anything else that you'd like to add before we wrap up this first program on the CBI?
Well, I think we have a lot more to come and add, but just to say that I think at the end of the day, we have to look at this holistically. Traditional sources of revenue for our country is not as it used to be. Foreign direct investments, under the traditional way we understood it, is drying up, and with what is happening in the world with COVID, a lot of countries don't have the monies because they have to look internally now to help their situation and the economies. So CBI offers really a good alternative to keep getting foreign direct investment into our country. So once we manage this well and we continue to do all the good things we're doing in Grenada, I think we could see some benefits coming along those lines.
All right, thank you very much, Senator Christopher Allie. And of course, it's been a pleasure, and we look forward to our next discussion on this matter.
Thank you very much, Mickey. It has been a pleasure.
All right, great. So folks, that's the first in the series of programs that we will be hosting on the program. Of course, we want to give you an idea, a better appreciation for what the CBI program is all about. You have asked for it, and of course, we have done our homework. And of course, the goodly gentleman, Senator Allie, has given us the assurance that he will spend the time with us explaining and answering our questions. In the next program, we'll allow you, the viewers, to ask your own questions as it relates to that program. All right, so that's the end of today's program, and we look forward to having you for our program number 2. Do enjoy. Have a good one.